about the tech. We've got quite a few people signed up, and I think there's 3 of you live, but it doesn't matter. There's 1 of you that's a.
Are you meeting now?
Yeah. I'm going to put the headphones on, so I'm not disturbing you. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, a warm welcome to you this evening. Really, really good to see you guys. This is, I think, really, apart from the university work I've done, I've probably done more research on this than anything else, largely because I have an interest in 1930s politics. So I'm recording this. So if for any reason you can't, you have problems on the bus, this will be recorded, and I'll pump this out either tonight or tomorrow on YouTube. Okay. So what I'd like to do is just to have a quick recap on what we've done so far, and I'm just going to share my screen, and I just want to make sure I can see you guys here. Good. Sarah, can you just tell me, can you just see a blank screen? Can you just give me a thumbs up? Can you just see a blank screen, Sarah?
Hang on.
Likewise, Sonia, can you, if I could just...
I'm back on. Hang on.
Yeah, good. Can you just see a blank screen?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So let's have a look at Inside the Mind of Adolf Hitler, Part 2. I'm not going to introduce myself. You know me by now. The only different thing I think I've got to tell you is that I've spent a lot of my time doing, let's just make sure I can see you guys. I've spent a lot of my time filming recently. If you want to see a program, I did the psychology on Wayne Couzens. That can be found on Channel 5 Catch Up. It's called... what was it called? It was called Killer in Plain Sight, Wayne Couzens. I've got some stuff coming out on Netflix and most importantly, ITV. I'll give you due warning. The ITV one will blow you away. And in fact, I've already spoken to some of you about this. It's called West End Girls, and it's about 4 serial killings. So yeah. So the objective was on the last one. If you haven't seen the last one, do not worry. Just go onto my channel and you can see part 1. So the whole idea was to examine the nature, personality, and the reasoning of one of the world's greatest mass murderers. I suppose one of the things that interests in true crime is mainly sort of contemporary serial killers. But let's not forget that this guy was one of the biggest genocidal mass murders this country has ever, this planet has ever seen. And in my view, one of the, and hear me clearly here, one of the best leaders. Yeah, one of the best leaders. I'm not saying I liked what he was doing, but in terms of leading his people. So the 4 things we're going to have a look at, or we did look at, is what Hitler thought of himself. That was the first thing we looked at. and what the German people thought of him, and what his associates thought of him, and what psychoanalysts thought of him. Just to contextualize this is during the lockdown, I was aware that some secret papers about offender profiles that had been written on Hitler had been made public. And I phoned the archives at Cambridge University and they sent them to me. And those are freely open for you to have a look at. I find them personally very, very interesting. And we're going to, on that point, we're going to be going onto my website a bit later on to download some documents. Now, if you can't do that, Sonia, you're on a bus, don't worry, because you can download them afterwards and I'll talk you through them. The test, let's just walk, yeah, so predicting his future behaviour, and that's the work of a chap called Walter Langer, and very graciously his family have given me his book, and again you can download that from my website, which we'll have a look at later on. So these were the 4 sessions. We've gone through the first 2. That's looking at his background. He believed himself to be a Messiah, you know, a Christian Messiah. And we looked at the secret wartime reports. And as I say, you can download those. And what I want for us to ask a question, was he mad? Was he bad? Or was he evil? You know, they're subtly different, those. And what do the mental illness measurements tell us? So I'm going to show you what they are. And then we're going to finally have a look at the psychological assessment, reconstruction and a conclusion. So that's what we're going to do. Whether this will, I've done this a few times before, whether it will last 2 hours, I don't know, but we'll have a short break into 1 hour. So we're going to look at what kind of man was he and how accurate were the conclusions and predictions of psychoanalysts. How accurate were they? Well, jumping ahead, quite remarkable really, because they're extremely accurate. And unsurprisingly, both psychoanalysts predicted that he was going to take his own life, terminate his own life. So this is the second part that we're going to have a look at. So what do the measurements tell us? Psychologists are very much involved, and before I got involved in this subject of psychology, I didn't really know what psychometric testing meant, psychometric, and the chances are at some stage you guys have had a look at them, psycho being the mind and metric testing. And I'm going to show you a test. I had my psychopathy professionally measured, which is good. I'm going to give you a health warning with these, and that is that in order to run these tests on people, you have to be suitably qualified. And it doesn't, I just make this very, very clear at university to undergraduates and A-level and GCSE students that if you run a psychopath test on someone, don't go flying off and say you're a psycho, because you know, you can't say that, because there's a lot more to go with it. But I hope you find those interesting. I particularly do. So let's, before we go any further, and again, these terms are bandied around like psychopath and sociopath, and I have defined these for you in the past. But looking at these broadly, let's just have a look at 3 and give some practical examples of these. Disgracefully, when I was a constable in training, we were given no training around mental health whatsoever, apart from what the law said. So unsurprisingly, I was ill-equipped to deal with people on the streets that were suffering from mental disorder, apart from calling out an inspector above and getting them deemed, as it was called, off to hospital. So psychosis. So in a psychotic episode, a person loses touch with reality as other people see it. They might be hearing voices. And let me just tell you that there was a time in this country where youth was doing a lot of glue sniffing, and that was causing a lot of psychosis, not often violence, but when it did breed violence, it was terrible. So they see or feel things that aren't there. They feel paranoid or believe, and I've put this in bold capitals there, or bold type, they believe things that don't rationally make sense. So the first thing I saw was down the King's Road in Chelsea on a busy Friday evening. There was a chap sitting on the side with a fishing rod, fishing down a drain. So, you know, and this guy thought this was perfectly reasonable, and it wasn't. I've mentioned the word paranoid or paranoia here. Paranoia is when you're convinced that people are out to get you in some way, whether that's by spreading rumors about you or trying to physically hurt you, or by conning you out of money. I don't know about you guys. I hardly watch terrestrial TV now. I'm hooked onto Netflix, and I saw a very good program on Netflix which was looking at dictators. So Armin, Colonel Gaddafi, Joe Stalin, and all of these guys towards the back ends of their lives put in further protection because they were sure, and they were probably right, that there were people coming to kill them. And they were probably absolutely right about that. I often find that certainly in old age is my experience, that you might say to someone, your relatives might mirror what I'm about to say, is that, oh yeah, I'm not going to buy that from so-and-so, they're conning me out of money, when in fact they're not. So often in old age, there is more trappings of paranoia. And this is really, really important here, is paranoid schizophrenia. It's a mental illness which affects the way you think. The symptoms may affect how you cope with day-to-day life. So this next bit is useful for street cops: hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking. Bit like my lives, this is, guys. Lack of motivation, slow movement, change in sleep patterns. Actually, this is very worrying. It's looking like me all the way through. Poor grooming, a change in body language, and no interest in social activities. Yeah, so you can see if someone's got one or more of these traits, the chances are they've got schizophrenia. Yeah. So those are three definitions. And again, you can go through in your leisure. So the test that we're going to is, given all the information and rhetoric so far, we're going to apply some tests to Adolf Hitler. It's highly interactive, and you can participate as much or little as you like. This is actually testing my skills, because I have to put this down, this presentation, and then go on to another screen. So I hope this works. This is really important, is you can use these tools afterwards and apply them to serial killers, politicians, friends and family, with that warning that I've given you. So the tests are, and you guys have seen these, and let's go straight into that, the HARE psychopathic checklist. But what we're doing is, forgive me one sec, we'll stop sharing this. What we are doing is we're looking at this in a different context, because we're applying this to Hitler. And I knew that I was going to have problems with this, so I'm just going to find this. Just give me 1 second. Here we are, HARE checklist. I should be able to get that now. Share screen. So even if you've done this with me before, oh, good, here we go. So can I ask you there, can you see like a grey document that says the HARE psychopath checklist? Yeah, good. This is adapted. So we're looking at this, and some of you have had copies of this. I'm always referring to it. But let's just go through a form of this, and maybe I'll sort of not help you through it, but give you some context and background of this guy that was a demagogue. A demagogue, you probably know that, but just to refresh your memory, that is a politician that seeks to fulfill their aims at all costs. So with the Holocaust, he was going to try and annihilate the entire Jewish population at all costs. He was a politician, whereas non-demagogue politicians don't do that. So let's just have a look at, you can score these, each variable. So 0 is no, 1 is maybe, and 2 is yes. So what I've done is I've adapted this here checklist for this particular exercise. So the first one we've got to look at is, was Adolf Hitler superficial? And this is, you can see the thing there describes an individual whose interaction style appears superficial to others. Usually the individual tries to make a favorable impression on others by shamming emotions, telling stories that portray him in a good light. They may use unnecessary, frequent and inappropriate jargon, okay? Well, the background, and you probably know this, but Adolf Hitler had huge mood swings. So the first one was of adulation. You may have seen when he conquered France during the Second World War, you can see him dancing. Equally, he was mood swings, depression, and the evidence is that towards the back end of his life, he had some sort of neurological disease. Again, you could have a look at superficiality. I didn't know until I read this that not once did Hitler go to any of the concentration camps. So he was advocating all this. He was signed up to it, but he never went. Was he superficial? Grandiose, absolutely no doubt about that. We started off, or the other part of this starts off, and I deliberately used that piece by seeing Hitler walking down the street. Very, very erect, very slow walking, extremely grandiose. And I've told you this before, which I find amusing, is that there's been some research done on men with moustache to measure how grandiose they are. Yeah, it's incredible. And obviously Hitler, apart from Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler, I can't remember anyone that's got that sort of small moustache. They're relatively concerned about the present and not the future, So one of the things that I'm not going to talk about is how good Hitler was as a leader or a military tactician. That's for historians. Deceitful here, this is the epitome of deceit. And it's worth, whether you're Christian or not, it's worth reading the last book of the Bible, Revelations, where you see the devil deceiving. That's worth having a look at. It wouldn't take long to read. So this guy was hugely involved in deception. So he used the fact that during the 30s there was a crash in Wall Street, which reverberated everywhere else. So he was seen as some sort of savior. And then one of his cronies set fire to their parliament building, the Reichstag, and they blamed that onto someone else. But in fact, the chances are that it was them to try and curry favor with the German people. But what I find very interesting about this is that he was able to deceive all classes, lower, middle, and upper class. One of the reasons he was able to deceive the upper class, and in fact get on with them, was particularly companies like Hugo Boss, for instance, that were complicit in the Holocaust. You know, time has gone now, and had they not been, I don't know whether you know, but Hugo Boss made uniforms from hair that had been harvested from the death camps. But with those big companies, he was able to persuade them to start trading, even during a recession, and 3 years in, giving them a bonds that they could cash in 3 years afterwards. And by God, did it work? It restarted the economy. So quite interesting. If you look at lack of remorse there, towards the back end of his life, he had the opportunity of writing a memoir or something, but all the evidence points that there was no remorse whatsoever. Clearly lacked empathy. If you look at Levi Belfield, the serial killer, he saw people as inanimate objects, and that is the same with Adolf Hitler, not just the people that he had murdered, but also his inner sanctum, his cabinet, if you like. All the time, he was getting them to fight amongst themselves, so they would curry favour, individual ones, with Hitler. A very, very strange cabinet, you might think. Doesn't accept responsibility. Well, I don't really need to talk about that. Impulsive, and again, I don't want to get into his military tactics, but the impulsiveness to keep driving his troops in order to be able to conquer Europe was phenomenal. And I don't know whether you're aware of that, but Hitler personally approved what we would know as crystal meth now for his troops. So a very significant point, his troops were on this crystal meth for 3 days during the Blitzkrieg, which started off, which kept them going. And that was his suggestion. Maybe he'd been advised, but and also I'm very, very angry militarily because there was a particular battle in France where all of the tanks could have been stopped, the German tanks, the German army could have been defeated, and that would have been the end of the Second World War. But because these guys were on crystal meth, they were bold, they were fast, they were lean, they were mean. It's quite obvious from some of your reactions, didn't know that. Poor behaviour controls. You could see here he was physically abusive. There is ample evidence that suggests that he was impotent, and there's ample evidence that suggests that he was a paedophile as well, probably having a relationship with his niece. Outbursts of temper, no doubt about that at all. So lacking goals, irresponsible, adolescent, antisocial behaviour. I have looked right back into his past, and he had a very, very difficult upbringing. And let me get this right. I think his uncle got married to the mum, and that caused a lot of problems. Also, he perceived himself to be a very, very good artist. So going back to his early days, and he wasn't, or he certainly wasn't accepted for art school, and that caused some problems. Adult antisocial behaviour, that speaks for itself. Yeah, that speaks for itself. So it depends how far you want to take this. Wikipedia, I always think, is a bit dangerous to look at as a source because it's not entirely accurate. But you can mirror this against other writings and see what you come up with. So let's just stop that sharing. And what I want to do is to go back to the presentation too. So just forgive me 1 second. Yeah. So we should be at the point where, so we should be back to our, hopefully back to our presentation. And we've just looked at this. The second one is to look at this is much more exciting. So I've said there's nothing stopping you using, but just as a measuring tool, the Hare psychopathy checklist on anyone. And if you want to download this, all you need to do is to go to my website, which is thecrimelab.co.uk, go to resources, and the first resource is what we're doing this evening. So not only has it got this evening's resources, it's got the book, and thanks, Sarah. I think it was you for plugging that. It's really worthwhile having a look. So what we're going to do is we're now going to have a look at the dark triad. I'm not going through all of it because you guys can do that in your own time. But what we're going to have a look at, we're going to have a quick look at this. Let me just see. Here we are. Dark triad. Share the screen. Yeah. So I'm hoping now you should be able to see another grey paper with, can I just ask you, that says the dark triad. Can you see that all right? Yeah, cool. So let's have a look at this. What I want you to do is to imagine, and we're not going to go through all of it, but by virtue of this, the previous one, you get a handle on who Hitler was. Can you just excuse me? I'm just going to have a quick drink here. The dark triad really builds, it's fairly new. It only came into existence in about 2009. And what it does do is it adds 2 extra layers to psychopathy, and we've already just looked at that. One of them is narcissism, and the other one is Machiavellianism. Narcissus was a Greek mythical character who fell in love with himself, and we would know a lot of people like that. And Niccolo Machiavelli was an Italian politician, and he too, like Adolf Hitler, or well before Adolf Hitler, wrote a book called The Little Prince. And in that, he was advocating as a politician, and you might think some of our politicians are like this, is in order to achieve your aim, then you can do anything to get to that goal. So what I want you to do, and as I say, I'm only going to just guide you through a little bit of this, is imagine that Hitler is sitting right next to you and you're going to ask him some questions, and we want you to note the answers that he would give. So just start off with Machiavellianism. The first layer here is you would say to him, is it wise to tell your secrets? Now, I'm going to help you with this because he was extremely secretive. And, you know, as a good politician, he should be sharing things with his cabinet, but he wasn't doing that. So if you've got to imagine what he would say. Does he disagree strongly? Does he disagree? And he's supposed to be telling the truth. This is neutral, either agree or strongly agree. Well, from what you've read and from what I've told you, that would be a very strong 5. And then just going through, I like to use clever manipulation to get my own way. You can work that out yourself. And then you can see the numbers for each statement and basically just top them all up and pop it into that box there. When you come to this here, again, it doesn't need for me to say, people see me as a natural leader. How many people did he cultivate to vote for him for this party? Did they see him as a natural leader? I would think so. This one here is called a reverse question. So where the questions have got an R at the end, as this one's got, I hate being the center of attention, it's reversed. So if, for example, I disagreed, the score will be reversed from 1 to 5. 2 would be scored 4 and 3 would remain the same. The whole idea of this is if you get someone that's well versed in psychometric testing, it's not catching them out, but it's just phrasing the question in a different way. So I hate being the center of attention. He's going to answer to that. I hate being the center of attention. He's going to disagree strongly, but the reality is you'd score him 5. So that's narcissism. And then psychopathy is the darkest of the dark triad, except it's the least harmful because, as I've explained to you before, psychopaths can lead normal lives and they're not necessarily going to go and commit crime or kill people. And in fact, I've given instances where it's actually quite useful to employ psychopaths. So there's 27 questions altogether. So you're just going to put total each one up. Once you've answered all of them, put a total score for each section. So then work out the mean. Sorry, this is becoming a bit of a maths lesson. For example, the raw score for Machiavellianism was 30. You divide that by the number of questions, and that comes out at 3.3. And then what I've got is I've got a little table here, and you can compare the norms here. So if you go above any of these, it means the person exhibiting greater traits than the norm. What I really enjoyed doing is last year I was on a lecture series at Marlborough College in Wiltshire, and I taught, I can't even, it was called Inside the Mind of a Murderer. And one day, we spent a whole day doing this. And I had 4 groups with about 30 students in each, and I asked them to do this. So I was able to get everyone's mean score and then compare that, and then just had a look at Hitler. So that's, again, this is available for you. As I stop sharing here, if I'm just going to put into, while I draw breath, I'm just going to put into here for everyone in the meeting. It's the crimelab.co.uk/resources, and that's got everything you need to know for today, and also for the previous session. Okay, so let's just go back to, so that's a quick look at some psychometric testing, which you can run yourselves, but I think I've put on here. Yeah, and the last one here is a flesh readability test. Again, you can apply this. What this does is, over time, a flesh test shows the readability of a document. So when I've been doing academic work, what I would do is I put this run this flesh test over it after I've gone through the grammar and spelling and everything, to make sure when I was at uni that the lecturer or the marker was able to read it. But what is really, really interesting with these flesh readability tests is that when Hitler started off with his speeches, he wasn't writing, and he very, very rarely wrote his own speeches. To start off with, when he was going around the beer halls, he was taken up by, he was adopted by a guy called Urquhart. Urquhart was an occultist or a devil worshipper, if you like, and he saw Hitler as someone that could unite the German people. So what I've done is I've run this flesh test around some of his speeches that obviously been translated. And looking at Hitler's IQ, he wasn't that intelligent. He was a Bohemian corporal during the First World War, sorry, albeit that he got the Iron Cross. So this flesh test is also useful in blackmail and kidnapping cases, because what you can do, particularly where it's protracted, because you can then run that flesh test and you're able to see how intelligent that person is. So for the likes of a psychologist, forensic or criminal psychologist, it's really important. I've put this here. This is just, again, a warning that these are indicators only, and I haven't given you the full picture with these. With this hair psychopathy checklist, you do need more evidence, and a tick box thing is just not good enough. So just be careful with that. I haven't really spoken to you at length what makes a psychopath. It's a complex interaction between biological psychology and social forces. And it tends that they got those formative roots traced back to childhood. There's no doubt about this. Both men and women psychopaths commit more violent crimes than other criminals. And I think I've probably told you, statistically in this country, it's believed that we've got between 2 to 3% of the population are measured as psychopaths. But when you start looking at prisons, people that are incarcerated in prisons, you're looking more at 24 to 25% of people that are psychopaths. Often they don't technically break the law, but cause other damage, such as economic damage, harm, and distress in companies. The other program that I've watched, if you really want to see a psychopath, is to watch the Netflix Tinder Swindler. And what you can do is to get that psychopathy checklist and start applying it to that guy's behaviour. One of the best bits of telly I've seen for years. So just to recap, we've looked at this already. And again, these are, let me pull out all of the variables here. But the most striking one is egocentricity. And I've told you how to apply that superficially, is if you see a group of people or someone you haven't seen for a while, just ask them how they are and then measure the amount of time it takes for them to ask you how you are or your family. Yeah, so egocentricity is a big part of psychopathy. Lying, deceitful is another one. And there are cases, you know, what was it called? The Green River murderer or strangler. He was able to beat a lie detector test on 2 occasions where he'd already committed multiple murders. Yeah, so psychopaths do have that ability. You can apply this to business skills. Call centres, surgeons, special forces, police officers, and sales. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, with sales, when you get, I think we can all see through it, you get someone that's a very hard salesman, possibly a psychopath, and then you get someone that's an expert, and an expert salesman will guide you through without actually saying you should buy now, whatever that is. We've been through this, and I'm not going to labour this point at all. Can I just tell you as well, just to let you know, that the reason I put this in for 2 hours is that sometimes I've given people the opportunity to go through those 2 measures that we've done. But in some ways, it's better that you read the secret papers and then do it. And we haven't got time to do that on here. But you can see the difference between the 2. Shared traits, top left-hand side of the screen, is that they regularly break or flout the law. Constantly lying and deceiving, impulse, doesn't plan ahead. But with psychopaths, it tends to be nature. In other words, they were born with it. It tends to be. Whereas with sociopaths, it's a learned behaviour. So what do I mean by that? My learned behaviour, my classic one was watching my grandmother making cakes, and over time I learned how to be quite a good cake maker. We were thinking of doing, actually, one of my business associates come up, and we're thinking of doing a thing live on Saturday morning called Crime and Cakes, which I think would be quite a good idea. So I'll show you how to bake a particular cake, and I'll talk about a case. Psychopath tends to be well educated. The sociopaths are often able to form long-term relationships. That was not the case with Hitler. It wasn't until 12 hours before he took his own life that he actually proposed to Eva Braun, and they got married. And then they both took cyanide, and he shot himself. but he was certainly not able to form a relationship. Psychopath carefully planned criminal enterprise and have got contingency plans so they don't get caught. Well, this was one of the biggest criminal enterprises in history, and the guy ended up in a bunker in Berlin. And do you know what I like about? I use Nazis when I'm talking about this, and I use the word Germans when I'm talking about decent German people. And if you ever get the opportunity to go to Berlin, as I've looked at, it's a beautiful city. And it's one of the most tolerant cities for LBQ, etc., etc. But of course, when he was in power, he would have homosexuals put to death. But what's very, very nice is Hitler's bunker, where he died. Above it now is a children's playground with swings and everything. And I think the German race have done a very, very good thing of not forgetting what happened, but also bringing it to an end by that sort of behaviour. Okay, so moving on, Dr. Kevin Dutton, a really, really good mate of mine, Professor Kevin Dutton, on this day, and I was at this lecture, said both, and we were looking at leaders and psychopaths, or he was teaching us this, both great and terrible leaders score higher than the general population for psychopathic traits. But it's a mix of those traits that determine success. So my heroes in terms of leadership and are Lord Horatio Nelson, and that's my sort of hobby really, and also Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I found her a very, very interesting person, but both of those had psychopathic traits. Even Mother Teresa of Calcutta, that was beatified. So Dutton goes on to say, for example, someone who scores highly for being influential, fearless, and cold-hearted could be a decisive leader who can make dispassionate decisions. If those traits are accompanied by a high score on blaming others, they might become a genocidal demagogue. And I explained what a demagogue was. If you take, and his name just escapes me, one of his best mates was Rudolf Hess, who was the deputy Führer. Hess flew to Scotland, as we know, parachuted out and tried to broker peace. They were not having any of that. But it's Hermann Goering. Hermann Goering was the head of the Luftwaffe, or the Nazi Air Force, and he was very, very good. He was a fighter ace, nearly as good as the Red Baron. I think he shot down 23 planes, so a real German hero. And the way he conducted his battles is, and I'm not condoning anything because he was part of the final solution decisions, he was Hitler's best mate because of what he did. And as soon as the Battle of Britain came and we won the Battle of Britain, he dropped Hermann Goering like a ton of bricks. So, you know, and then starts blaming other people other than himself. Dutton has placed various people in a psychopathic rank order. So what we're looking on now is we're moving slightly away from Hitler to look at other leaders, because I want you to be in a position to be able to use these templates to maybe score a politician. Because it may well be, I can't think of one in this country, I'm sure there has been, where their tendencies is extreme right wing or extreme left wing, and those are politicians we need to be careful of. So Dutton has placed various people in a psychopathic rank order. Here is a list of those top 10 people. Can you list 5 of them who feature in the top 5? and you can see Hitler is there. And because you know, he's a psychologist, he doesn't just sort of guess or come up with it. We'll show you what that is. So can you guess your list of five of them who would feature in the top 5 in terms of psychopathic rank order? Here's the result, and these here are the scores where the people have been scored differently. Do you know, this is sorry, let's go back to this. I find this really, really interesting. Henry VIII, and there's a lot of rhetoric around it. You know, he wasn't a bad bloke. It's like, you know, the Cray twins. Well, they weren't bad lads. Yes, they were. They were psychopathic murderers, you know, and anyone thinks different, I think they've got it wrong. But I actually quite liked Henry VIII. But my wife has bought me a couple of books I've read, and he was a nasty piece of work. You know, again, a psychopath. All the time he thought that his wives were having affairs when certainly most of them were. But you can see here that the way that Dutton has scored them, Saddam Hussein's first, Henry VIII, Idi Amin, Donald Trump is above Adolf Hitler. That's the way Dutton has scored these. This is the way to do it. Again, they can be broken down. I'm not a mad lover of talking to clients too long about statistics because it gets a bit boring. But let's just put these in here. There is another way of measuring psychopathy. If you look at fearlessness and dominance, self-centered and then impulsivity, and then cold-heartedness, is you can see if they're greater than 68 for men, they're over and above. And these are SIF, I've got this slightly wrong actually, STIME, and you can see there Machiavellian egocentricity. So it's a slightly different way of measuring it. And then this guy here has then measured all of the 2016 candidates to see where they feature. So again, you'll get the opportunity to see this in great detail, and you can have a look at it. The stress immunity is of great interest to me here, just seeing, because the higher they score, the greater they are to immunity. So you can see who scores the highest there is Henry VIII, scores quite high on that, 28. And the reason being is that he had nothing to stress about at all in his life, apart from the country maybe being attacked. This is and I'll share this with you. This is a professional screening that I had on myself. Had it not come out that way, I wouldn't have shared it with you probably. But you look at myself, the psychopathy threshold, and then the population average. Yeah, so you can see, looking at my interpersonal style, my lifestyle, over antisocial features. So this makes me 23.5% more psychopathic than the average person. But it says you do not qualify as a psychopath on the psychopathy checklist. Because had I done that, I wouldn't have shared that with you. But this was done by a psychologist, and it was done over a lot of information, 360-degree information about myself. So there are other ways of measuring it. We've been through this dark triad, but what I want to do is this. Yeah, this is what we've been through. 10 facts here. Dark triad traits do occur in women, but more commonly found in men. They're mainly nature as opposed to nurture, which is the same as psychopathy. Dating apps are a gift for the dark triad male, i.e. superficially charming. Yeah, which is exactly what Hitler was. You've only got to see some of the videos, well, videos or film, cine film, that was shot at either the Wolf's Lair or at his, and I forget what it's called now. He had this place near Eagle's Nest where he used to go to relax. Yeah. Males may appear that they will change over time for the better. They never do, as we would see, particularly like with dating. Narcissists aren't typically aggressive, but respond very badly to ego threats. There is very good evidence that young women are attracted to dark triad males. And I've just termed this the peacock effect. You know, I peacock out my feathers. Here I am, you know, have a look at me. And young women tend to be attracted to that. I've got a couple of friends of mine, very, very good psychologists, that are doing some studies into predominantly women who want to have a relationship, sexual or otherwise, with people that are in prison for serious offences. It's called hyperbristophilia, and there's some very good stuff coming out about that. Men who embodied the dark triad are generally not faithful. Can I just stop here? Is that I've got 3 daughters, all 3 of them are business partners, where we do different things. And when they had boyfriends or relationships when they're in their teens, as the males were being brought home to see mum and dad, I'd run a dark triad screening over them, which they never found out about. And one of them I was very, very concerned about. With one of my daughters. Anyway, he turns out to be one of the nicest men and one of the best son-in-laws I could possibly have. So successful behaviours self-reinforce, particularly when this comes to domestic abuse, and forgive me with that. There's interesting research. I told you about eyebrows and moustaches. If the dark triad is truly inheritant, psychologists could research and treat before heinous acts are committed. And you can have a look at that eyebrows narcissism thing. Yeah. So we've had a look at these 2 tests here. This is the flesh test, which again I don't propose to go through. I think it's on. Yeah, you can get the flesh test is on that bundle of documents which comes with this particular talk. So what we want to know is, what kind of man was he? Was he mad? Was he bad? Was he evil? What sort of man was he? And how accurate were the conclusions and predictions of psychoanalysts? If you look at this from a pure psychological point of view, and that is psychology, if you accept this definition, the nature of human nature, and then you look at normalized behavior, Hitler was completely off the scale, wasn't he? You know, and we talked about blame. There is evidence as well that after the First World War, he received some information from someone saying the Jews are to blame for this, and he took that on and then went about what we know and historically we know. So the how accurate were the secret reports? You can see Hitler there, Fidel Castro, this is Khrushchev, and that is Colonel Gaddafi. These secret reports, my friends, were so accurate. That is why they were kept secret for so long, because when JFK went to see Khrushchev, where there was the Cuban Missile Crisis, he wanted to find out what type of person Khrushchev was. So these psychoanalytic reports and measures were actually used. And that's, as I say, that's why they were kept secret for so long. So just going back right to the beginning, it's not the best way to do this. I should have had a slide right at the end. What we have looked at is if you've been with me from the beginning, and even if you've missed part 1, you can still catch up with this. is what was his upbringing. So we looked at the background. There's no thoroughly reliable information, but we can certainly see that he had the Messiah complex. We then looked at these secret wartime reports just to see what they were telling us, and they were extremely accurate. And I've told you the reason they were kept secret for so long was to ensure that they could be used from the mid-40s and on, right the way to the end of the Cold War and further. So we looked at mental illnesses. You know, again, you can look at from his character, from his demeanour, from his behaviour, what is it that it tells us about him? Was he mad? Was he bad? Or was he evil? Yeah, and that's quite a difficult one. And we've looked at psychological assessment. I've shown you how to do that, and you can go back if you want and have a look at that. What kind of man was he, and how accurate were the conclusions and predictions of psychoanalysts? So had we done the 2 exercises on our own, this has taken us 1 hour. It would have been, if we'd gone through those, we'd be heading towards 2 hours. But that is, let's stop sharing. I'm just having a look in the chat box. Just having a look in the chat box. Yeah, so we're towards the end of this now, really. So as always, thank you very much for coming on this evening. It's really good to see you. Is there any questions that any of you guys want to pose? And if you do, there's only a few of us on this evening. Just feel free to take your mute off and ask any questions you want to.
What were the 4 men that were on the pictures a few minutes ago?
They were.
I think I knew 3 of them, but there was
yeah, this was, I think, probably the one that most of us didn't know, and I didn't know, is you've got Hitler, Fidel Castro, Colonel Gaddafi, and that was Chairman Khrushchev. So he was, during the USSR at the time of JFK, he was the one that was having the missiles pointed at Florida from 80 miles away in Cuba. Good. Well, I think I've got away with it very, very lightly. If you've got children, I hope you're getting on well in the summer holidays. I've now got grandchildren, so it's like a trip down memory lane for me, because I'm back looking after my children, my grandchildren, during the holidays. So in terms of what's coming up in the fast lane, myself, Colin Sutton, and one other person who's going to be a guest. Next year, we're putting on a roadshow. So I think we've got 12 venues in the United Kingdom. I think we're starting off at Glasgow, working right the way down the country. And it's going to be called something around the detective, the psychologist, and the undercover officer. It's really the undercover officer that I've had the privilege of meeting was probably one of the most prolific in this country, female undercover officer. And at the time that she was being deployed, she had 2 very young children. And I say that because I did some UC undercover work. There's no way I could have done it with kids. She's just written a book, and she's an absolutely dynamic speaker. Some of you might have actually seen her, I think, on one of the gigs that I've done. Yeah, come to Stoke. I need to do that, really, don't I? Because you've asked this before, Sarah, so maybe I need to do that. So what I'm going to do, obviously I can see exactly in front of me who's come on this evening. Basically, all of my contacts, my list, will get the opportunity of seeing this as a YouTube, and I'll put that up in the next couple of days. I don't even know what's up next. I think it is in September. I think it's Women Who Kill. Yes, it is women who kill. And then in October, I've got former Detective Constable Peter Blexley. He's the governor on Hunted. Yeah, and he's going to tell a very, very interesting story, which I'm just going to call Wanted. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Yeah. So unless there's any other questions, look after yourselves. Thanks very much for coming on board here, and let's hope we have a bit of nice weather.
Bye. Good to see you all.
Bye.